My name's Ella Whelan. I'm the assistant editor at Spiked, and I'm delighted to be here today to chair this session, Are Young People Scared of Sex? I hope the debate won't be scary. I hope it'll actually be a bit of a laugh. But let's see. There has been a recent rise in fear-mongering and an interest in sex, especially in young people's lives. But young people are not necessarily having all that much sex. Recent studies show that much more young people than previous generations are abstaining from sexual encounters. Young people are having less sex, and this coincides with the fact that sex is on telly, it's in books, it's on social media, pretty much everywhere you look, from Big Brother to Celebrity Love Island. Almost everywhere, sex is available, as well as, online porn, things like that. So there's not really a taboo about sex as such anymore as it was for perhaps older generations. And yet, people in their 20s and 30s are having a lot less sex. And this also coincides with the fact that we know much more about sex in terms of sexual education is being brought in at a younger stage, even in primary schools now. So we're all talking about sex. Why aren't we all having it at the same time? Is it because we're afraid, or are we a bunch of prudes? I don't think it's the latter. And does this also tie into the fact of the less funny aspect of this debate, which is that there has been a supposed rise in sexual assault and harassment, and we see frequent news stories, especially about campuses and university life, women's experiences in clubs and in nightlife of women reportedly being sexually harassed and sexually abused on quite a dramatic level. I think some of the recent reports show that there was one that said that 1 in 5 women at university will have experienced sexual harassment in their life. So is that feeding into the fact that we've got a bit of an issue with sex? Or are we really freaking out about nothing? Are young people actually just kind of getting on with it and not really having that much of a fuss about it? So to discuss this, I've got a fantastic panel of speakers, and I'm delighted they could all come here today. Before I introduce them, I'll just state that they each have 5 minutes to introduce their opening ideas, and then we're going to go straight out to the audience in true Battle of Ideas style. We want to have this as much of a lively debate and a fun debate as possible. First of all, I'm delighted that we have Professor Camille Paglia. Camille is Professor of Humanities and Media Studies at the University of Arts, Philadelphia, and a prolific author, most famously for Sexual Persona, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson. But she is also, and we're really excited about this, she's also got a new book out next year in March called Free Women, Free Men, Sex, Gender and Feminism. After Camille, Rosamund Urwin will be speaking. Rosamund is a columnist for the Evening Standard and a senior feature writer there as well. And she is also a regular guest on Sky, BBC and Radio 4. After that, we will have Emily Hill. Emily is the acting commissioning editor at The Spectator and is also author of Bad Romance. And then finally, last but not least, we have Lucy Ivison. Lucy is a school librarian and a teacher specialising in building confidence and creativity, and she's also the co-author of best-selling book Lobsters, a socially awkward love story. And she also runs an online teen magazine, Whatever After. So, fantastic panel of speakers. I'm really excited. And without further ado, Camille, please kick us off.
All right, so let me say that the question of sex, sexual activity, and gender has been my obsession since I was experiencing my first gender dysphoria and dysfunction in childhood. Okay, I would call myself transgender. Okay, in some way I'm between the genders and identify with neither one. And I was raised at a time of great social repression, sexual repression, when the cult of virginity was in the air, being hammered by Hollywood in one Doris Day movie after another, where she defends her virginity against usually Rock Hudson. And it was a time when the Catholic Church in which I was raised was extremely strict. The Italian Catholicism of my immigrant youth, all 4 of my grandparents were born in Italy, as was my mother, was replaced by a kind of vindictive, inquisitional Irish Catholicism, which was extremely puritanical about sexuality. So I belong to the generation of the sexual revolution that was made possible really by the appearance of the pill in 1960, which allowed women for the first time to control their own sexuality. I myself feel, after all my studies, okay, and investigations into science and anthropology and culture, that sex was designed for procreation. Hello, okay? That's what drives the sexes together. The sexes don't really understand each other, don't really like each other, but they're driven together by an animal instinct, okay? And it is animal instinct which has been utterly excluded from today's women's studies and gender studies curriculum, where it is believed that gender is merely a social construct, the result of social pressures, the result of refractions through language. I mean, just one idiocy after another is being promulgated in these gender studies programs. So I do believe, okay, that we are natural beings and we're being driven, okay, toward procreation. There's a principle, I believe, inside nature which says that when there's overpopulation, then, okay, you have a rise of homosexuality, which I regard as not unnatural, but a natural law. Okay, when nature feels there are too many entities or beings, then this overflow of desire goes into other places. All right? So I believe that, again, that homosexuality is within nature's master plan. Now, I also believe from my studies that in addition to animal instinct, that we are imaginative beings and conceptual beings that distinguishes us from animals. And in fact, there's a great deal of sexual symbolism going on in who you are attracted to and why. Freud has been eliminated, okay, from the gender studies curriculum. The same thing. He's declared a sexist. He was thrown overboard long ago. Okay, but he has this idea of family romance that imprints us forever with a certain constellation that determines what we are attracted to or what we are repelled by. I do believe, from my observations, that this is at work in people, and that right now there's nothing in our culture which encourages us to detect, to analyze ourselves, and to discover what is our personal map of erotic attraction. Okay. I believe that, for example, I'm always valorizing gay males, okay, in the gay male sexuality, the daring, the boldness, the willingness to have sex with strangers and to accept the consequences of it, which can be being beaten up or killed. Okay, and instead we have the women. Oh dear, protect us from our impulses, protect us from our bad choices, and the endless sentimentality that we have to deal with today. Okay, being promulgated on university campuses. So I believe there's a shadow script going on in who we are attracted to. So the sexual, my generation, sex was under a taboo, okay, and we broke through, okay, and therefore there was a heat to sexuality that's completely gone with the availability now of sex. Okay, it's the banality of sex, the omnipresence of sex. There's nothing of any interest that I see, okay, being produced by Hollywood or in any aspect of contemporary culture. The last sizzle that there was, in my view, was when Sharon Stone uncrossed her legs, okay, in Basic Instinct. That was 1992. Okay, when you look at the great Hollywood films, okay, they were operating from the early 1930s into the early 1960s under a production code, okay, which was very strict about what could be permitted, okay, to be shown. All right, that was the great period of heat and sex and sizzle, okay, when you could not show anything. So you had so I'm a product of the Hollywood system, all right? I believe in hot sex. Alas, it was an illusion, okay, because we're surrounded now by a deadness and a dullness, which is what the purpose of this panel, okay? Young people don't know what they want. Why should they want it, okay? Say something. They've been served thin gruel of dogma, okay? So it's no wonder they're not having sex. At any rate, okay, sex flourishes with taboo, okay? For example, Madonna, okay? When Madonna was rebelling against Roman Catholicism, her videos were fabulous, okay? Incredible electricity. When she finally got over that and went on to Kabbalah, okay, she's been absolutely boring ever since. Okay? you need something which is forbidden, okay, to get heat. Today, everything is possible, and then nothing is interesting. This is my explanation.
Rosamund.
So when I read the title, I wondered if I really should have been asked to speak, because I'm not sure that at 32 I truly count as a young person anymore. I was part of the last generation to grow up before the explosion in internet pornography. And yes, a friend was caught by his parents looking at pictures of topless women online. And on a school trip, I remember a boy shoving porn mags drizzled in baby oil into the room that we girls were sharing. Our retaliatory action was to get a sanitary towel and smear it with red lip gloss, so we won that war in retaliation. But I never particularly felt that porn was encroaching in my life as a teenager. And when I went to university, it was certainly before discussions of consent were really big in college. And admittedly, I think that's a very welcome change that's come. And when Tinder arrived, I was quite a late adopter there, though I do have a sort of minimal experience of swiping left and right. Very unsuccessful experience. I met 4 men, each of whom I thought within minutes of meeting, you are never ever going to see me naked. One date, for slightly complex reasons, I brought my dog, and I ended up using him as a canine shield to stop this man trying to kiss me. And I'm sure he tells that story as a bad date story too, incidentally. But one of the things I thought from that very limited Tinder experience is how complex attraction is, and that the problem of reducing someone to an area they live in, an age, and a photo, and the fact that anyone now can be quite witty for sort of 3 conversations. I think it's sort of what series like Friends have given the world, that anyone can be witty for a few little comments, and you meet them in person, and immediately you think, oh my God, no. And I think that's, for me, why Tinder doesn't necessarily, for a lot of people, translate into sex and passion. Anyway, because I wasn't sure that I quite qualified with that fairly minimal experience of being a young person, I sort of outsourced some of my work to people who are under 24. Actually, I got some quite good responses that I thought I'd quite like to read out. So one of these very young people said, well, we're all stuck living at home, so no wonder we're not really having any sex. Basically, nobody moves out. We're still living with our parents till we're 25, or we're living in flat shares with tiny, tiny walls, and frankly, that's not conducive to us getting laid a lot. And then she said as well, casual sex may not be so much of a taboo, but I still think women have to walk a tightrope to avoid being what she termed slut-shamed. If you ever watch X on the Beach, you'll see that the boys see no contradiction, and I hope no one watches that incidentally, but if you do, no contradiction in trying to bed all the girls, but then call them sluts afterwards for having sex. And then I asked a 22-year-old bloke, and he said, I definitely think there's an association with the fear of being used on Tinder. In my experience, I've noticed a lot of women will post in their bios that they don't want to hook up, as if that's the expected thing, and feel they have to say that in order to pursue a serious relationship. If they go on the first date and end up having sex, some will probably feel that that's as far as it will go, and probably that delaying having sex will boost their chances of having a genuine relationship. And then another chap had a quite interesting story that I wanted to tell because I think it fits really well with this subject. A few months ago, 2 friends, girls, were at my house, and one of them had taken a guy back after a night out before. The guy had asked her in the bedroom if she consented to sexual activity. I'm not sure of his exact phrasing, and the question weirded her out, and she told him to leave. The girls were laughing about him being weird. The guys in my house all stood up for the guy. I guess there's pressure on us as guys to do the right thing and attain full consent. But there's never an expectation for the girl to attain consent from the guy, even though he might also be intoxicated and doing things he wouldn't normally do. Now, I'm not going to pretend that story is particularly typical, but I did think it was incredibly interesting and also slightly telling about the world in which some 22-year-olds find themselves operating in. And I've only got a little bit left, but I also wanted to say that when you're faced with this incredibly complex sexual world, is it that unsurprising that you might instead turn to some self-love in front of a computer? Because it is a hell of a lot easier than engaging with other humans. All your niche desires are catered for online. And I think Janice Turner called it generation masturbation. And my question is that so bad? Because in the old Woody Allen, I think it is, line, it is sex with someone you love. No risk of STIs. There are worries there, clearly, which I don't have time, but I'm sure other people will delve into with the porn generation, the idea of people escalating their desires in what they want to look, what they need to see in order to get to sort of enjoy it. And I think there's all sorts of problems associated with that, but I'm sure other people on the panel will get onto that.
Thank you. Emily, thanks.
Okay, so first of all, I want to apologise. I'm only here because I really wanted to meet Camille Paglia, and because, like an idiot, I actually thought I could answer this question. You see, it struck me like one of those things you read on the cover of a women's magazine, such as, "Is your manicurist a sex slave?" And I love those questions because the only thing I really know about anything is that I don't know a damn thing about anything. But F me, I just think, I can answer that question because I don't have a manicurist, so she can't possibly be a sex slave. And I've been out in Clapham Junction on a Friday night amongst hordes of scantily clad young people who feast on each other like zombies in the streets. And all summer, I sat in a hot green park where teenagers melted into each other like ice cream. And every day, I witnessed some millennial mount another in a manner most repulsive to the naked eye. And maybe I've got sex on the brain, but I see it everywhere I look. So I thought, okay, I'll simply stand up, I'll eyeball the lot of you in a petrifying manner, and ask, are young people scared of sex? And answer with Margaret Thatcher-like certainty, no, no, no. And then you'll know the answer to this question that you so desperately wanted answered. You actually turned up. I'll sit down and shut up, and we can all listen to the goddess Camille Paglia. But then I was told I had to make a 5-minute speech, so as I said, I apologise. When I think of young people and sex, I get Philip Larkin stuck in my head, who said sex was invented in 1963, which was much too late for me. Only it turned out after he died that Larkin had oodles of sex and was pretty perverted, really, and then a lot of idiots started denigrating his poetry. I believe that every generation believes there is some variation in the amount of sex to be had, and throughout history, the mass of sex has probably been pretty much constant, because sex is a human urge that affects us like hunger or thirst. And although there may be young people who are afraid of eating, we call them anorexics and don't diagnose a whole generation as food deprived. I'm sure for every squeamish and rarefied young person talking to Vice magazine or Janet Street Porter, there are at least 100 who are utterly debauched. I think this sex thing, like the rest of the Stepford student generation snowflake stuff, originates with a very vocal minority totally unrepresentative of the whole. I reckon they're upper middle class navel gazers rather than a swelling mass of brazen youth. When people tell me about safe spaces in universities, I always think, yeah, I think most of them are still spending 3 years very, very, very drunk. If students have changed in recent years, I think it's because they're probably worried about their finances. But sex is still free, or at least it's more cost effective than, I don't know, trampolining. And why would young people be afraid of sex? We have the pill, thank God, and have done since the 60s. There are effective precautions against STDs, and most of us are godless, so we don't have to worry about getting smoked down or have to marry before we do it. When I was a young person, I had no fear of sex at all. I thought it was very liberated, and I didn't give a damn about it. And so I had sex with some really hideous people. And aside from an utterly depraved poet who taught me a thing or two, the sex really wasn't worth the men. So I think today the only thing young people have to fear about sex is sex itself. And this is where I'm changing tack. Because I'm still going to insist that the young aren't scared of sex, but I'm going to say that they probably ought to be. I think fear is something that you learn. You're not afraid of fire until you get burnt, or heights until you fall. And I wasn't scared of sex once, but I am now, because I think sex, when done right, is about making a connection with another human being. And a lot of how sex is treated today is about bodies colliding without connecting. And this sort of sex is no good for the human heart at all. So, as Rosamund mentioned, Vanity Fair tells us we're living through the dating apocalypse right now. This article described New York in the age of Tinder, where men who sound pretty much like Patrick Bateman in American Psycho boast of penetrating and discarding women on a nightly basis and feeling next to nothing at all. And maybe these oily young coves get pleasure out of that sort of thing, but I doubt many of the women do. And I worry girls who are stupid like I was will subscribe to this utter bullshit and think themselves very modern and cool when these encounters are actually straight out of Evelyn Waugh's Vile Bodies, when Nina says, "All this fuss about sleeping together. For physical pleasure, I'd sooner go to my dentist." Whenever I think of what I want from sex, I think of Andrew Marvell's line, "The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace." And when I was young, I would not have thought about that. that sex, if done right, should be an embrace. I'd have been thinking about when I last had a bikini wax. But I learned over time that an embrace is not just what I want, it is, as a human, what I need and what I deserve. And I hope all these young people feasting upon each other in Clapham Junction have that. But if sex isn't that for them now, I hope they do get a bit scared, so one day it will be.
I think the first thing I should say is exactly like you, I am quite old and I work with young people all the time who remind me just how old I am, and I write books about sex for teenagers, and again I feel often that even though I don't even feel like a whole generation older than them, that there's masses about the way they live their lives that I don't really understand and feel a part of. And that's the problem when you write for teenagers. And I'm constantly trying to figure out these things, and they're always showing me things like Snapchat, and I'm always like, but I just don't understand. What's it about? So I do think that there is this issue that often young people are excluded from. I'm asked all the time to talk about young people, but I think that they're often excluded from dialogues about themselves. So with that in mind, I've asked every school and every college that I've gone into since I was asked to be on this panel, I've asked them all about this issue. And interestingly, I'm no academic or scientific researcher, but they were all like, I don't think that's true. Every single school I went into, I asked about 1,000 young people, and they were all like, really? And I was like, really? It's a scientific thing. It's been proven. And they were like, really? So I don't know how it was put together, the research, but nowhere I went did they seem to kind of buy into it or think it was true. In fact, they all just said, oh, they're always making things up. I don't think that's true. So I don't know about that. Maybe we could look into that a bit more. But when I did kind of trying to think about what I thought about it and kind of put together what they had told me, the first thing is, I think thinking about casual sex as opposed to sex in a relationship is a very different thing. And that was something that they all talked about, that having sex with your long-term partner perhaps isn't a frightening prospect, where the idea of casual sex perhaps is quite frightening. They also all, apart from one school that I went into, referenced a particular video they had been shown in sex education that was incredibly horrifically frightening, and they all kind of described it to me, and I was like, oh no, I don't remember. And I used to teach PSHE, and I think there was, in this country, they were incredibly worried about the teenage pregnancy rate. I remember as a teacher we had endless training about it and what we were going to do in schools to, you know, bring it down, and that it was a huge problem and it was this embarrassment and blah, blah, blah. And I think they did go on a massive, massive drive to frighten the shit out of people. And it kind of seems to have worked, because they all said, oh, this video, and then at the end the girl says, if only I'd known and now I'm going to die. And they were all like, yes, that video. So I kind of thought, oh God, maybe we did too good a job. You know, the teen pregnancy rate has come down, but at what cost? And then I spoke to a nurse who I work with a lot, and she was saying how many of her colleagues on university campuses will go, you know, they have to sort of try and say to people, do you really need an STI test? Because, you know, it sounds like you're having safe sex. Stop coming here every time you have sex. You're fine. Like, you're using a condom. It's probably okay. But people are very worried about it. I think people have spoken about pornography. When I worked as an agony aunt for the BBC's website, we got huge numbers of emails from people who were frightened, not really about having sex, but about that if they had sex, what the next step after having sex would be. So that you maybe have had sex, and then it's like, well, we've had normal sex. What comes next? Is it anal sex? Is it doing all these things that boys see in videos that I don't feel comfortable with? And that was something, again, you were saying, you know, I don't think I'd ever seen anyone have sex until I had sex, but that's certainly not the case. And we know now by 12 people have been exposed to all kinds of things. And I mean, a girl said to me in year 9 at my school, I don't really want to have sex. I don't want anyone to spit on me. And I thought, oh, Christ. I don't want anyone to spit on you either. So that, in some schools they talked about this thing, which I'm not really a part of, which is this kind of obsession. I remember when I was young in the 90s, you know, Kate Moss was the kind of cool person, and she clearly drank loads and took loads of drugs and was really thin and was a kind of like, you know, live fast, die young type of person. And I don't think that that is kind of what people aspire to now. You know, loads of the young people I work with, you know, even my library prefects at school, they're vegans and they exclude all this stuff, and they're on all these Instagram accounts and they're so bothered about, you know, they don't want to eat this and that, and it's all like that. So, and they were talking about the idea that it's not enough just to be thin. You know, you have to have this sort of fantastic health holistically, and you have to be mentally healthy and fit, you know, you have to look amazing, and it's all this kind of delicious, not I've got anything against deliciously Ella, but you know, that kind of health obsession. Then they were talking about shame, and I think, Camille, you said that everything is allowed. I don't think that's true. I think that actually there's still this thing about what your number is, you know, looking amazing and looking sexually appealing, but actually, you know, you can't really sleep with anyone because then you're a slut, and like the walk of shame. What your number is, are you, you know, girlfriend material, all that kind of stuff. And then again, this idea about the snowflake generation, I don't think it's completely true, but I've certainly, more and more in my teaching, you know, I think parents are much more involved, and they really desperately know that they can't fuck their kids up, so they desperately try not to, and they talk about our homework and our university application and our this, and you think, oh, okay, and you know, and they say, oh, I'm not one of those helicopter parents, but can I sit in for the meeting? And you're like, oh, okay. So I don't know whether maybe that is something, and you know, if your parents are kind of so involved in every aspect of your life, maybe you do become a little bit less confident about making decisions about who you're going to have sex with or not. But I don't really know. You tell me.
I think that's a good point to come out to the audience, so let's see some hands.
I'll play the devil's advocate a little bit. I think as young people we should have some moral decency and not sleep around. We should have sex when we're married. It will stop STDs, it will stop STIs, we'll stop the confusion about alternative relationships. No, marriage, as defined in the Bible between a man and a woman, is the only kind of sex that should be had. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks for that.
I don't really know how to follow on to that. But I think amongst my friends in particular, it's more of an endemic fear and confusion surrounding the pill, because I think recent studies said it increases depression by like 80% or something like that. So I think you don't want to increase your chances of subjecting yourself to anxiety or depression. And so the fact that I think when you go to the doctors and ask, you know, what pill should I take, because there's so many options and you're not educated on it in school, you're just sort of in sex ed, you have like a banana and a condom and sort of left to your own devices. And so I think because of the like clear correlation between anxiety and depression as a result of the pill, people are scared to then go on it and not necessarily wanting to use a condom. So I don't think it's that people don't want to have sex. I think it's that they're scared of not doing it the right way or the way that gains the most satisfaction. And if you're not necessarily with someone, and if you're just having, you know, sort of random sex here and there, which is completely acceptable, then I think you want to show them that you can show them a good time or things like that, and so you don't want to not give them satisfaction, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
It's interesting that it's an all-female panel. I'd be interested to hear some of the men in the audience of whether they see that there's some scared issue around sex. And I think it's more about expectations of an individual on how to perform. And I have two friends, and one's a girl, one's a guy, and one the girl's partner. He has a huge amount of pornography, and she's like, you know, there's nothing I've not done, and still he thinks I'm boring. And so I'm like, well, that's really worrying. And so where's his expectation and what's her expectation? And similarly, from the guy's perspective, who has seen a lot of pornography, he is like, well, what can I do to satisfy women? Because I think that all women in pornography should either look like this or do this. And so what's the panel's view on these kind of topics?
Just to talk about Camille's point about this gay lifestyle where you have sex with as many people as you possibly can and you don't really care about the sexual health and sort of stuff. I'm not sure if that was relevant maybe about 20 years ago, but I know now for young people that is just not true. I don't know where that's come from. I'm not sure if that's something like from Queer as Folk or something like that. It was like a 90s drama, but I really don't think that's applicable to today. When you have things like Grindr or very, very little teen gay representation in the media, I don't think that's applicable at all. It's almost more scared because you just don't see any functioning teen relationships that are gay on media at all. I don't think there's this idea that you can just go out and have sex with anyone because you just don't know what people's intentions are anymore. So, yeah, that's what I thought.
I'm going to come back to the panel. It is interesting now with consent classes and a certain view of a way of having sex, that actually perhaps we are becoming more like that point than we would like to hope, more kind of conformist. So let's have reactions from the questions. Camille, kick us off.
Pornography. Okay, that I endorse, defend, celebrate pornography. Not that I use it particularly, but I in my opinion, okay, pornography tells the truth about the animal nature of sexuality. And most women are not consumers of pornography. Many men, not all men, are. I think that pornography, or the ubiquity of it, demonstrates the greater involvement of the visual senses in male sexuality with sexual desire. Women want things to be softer, they want a more romantic story, they want a process of seduction and so on. So I maintain that pornography is by its nature ugly, okay, and animalistic, okay, but what it usually shows is, at least heterosexual pornography, what it shows is women who want sex, women who are desirous of sex. And I believe that is the vision of life that pornography is kind of a door into. And whether there are, it used to be said, well, any problems with sexual functioning are due to guilt injected by a moralistic religion. But I think at this point, with this new kind of universal secularism that I find rather insufficient, as an atheist I find it insufficient, I think that no longer applies. So I think there are all kinds of issues involved in sexuality that have to do with personhood and individuality and personality and its relationship to these overwhelming forces of nature. So I believe that pornography, what women have difficulty with pornography because it is so reductive to the actual sex act. But I think that men's higher interest in it, okay, is coming from their sense that women's ambivalence about sex. Whatever women think about themselves and their own appetite for sex, it is pretty clear that most men believe that their desire for sex exceeds that of women's desire for sex, and perhaps these things are hormonally related. People who are transgender and who are injecting themselves with male hormone experience a surge in libido and a certain kind of brutality, even in the way they suddenly, a kind of mechanism suddenly that's revealed, okay, the mechanistic nature of sexual desire. Similarly, people who are injecting themselves with female hormone discover a sudden serenity and a certain calm and a certain liberation from the sex instinct. So I think there's a hormonal aspect to all this, and a great disjunction between male and female early on in the teenage years, because men attain their hormonal peak in their late teens or early 20s, and women don't really achieve that until their 30s. So there you have it. It's not the tragedy of sex; it's the comedy.
Thank you.
Could I?
Yes, far away.
The girl who was talking about the pill, I think it is an interesting discussion, and I really welcome young people
really taking ownership more of the kind of contraception they take. I was on a board with the government, and I was really surprised. I was asked to go and be on this board, which was about how they were going to spend this £20 million on kind of sex education about risky behaviours. And it was really interesting to me that when I went to this board, about 50% of the people on it were from pharmaceutical companies, which is quite shocking. And, you know, the first pill that you are offered when you go to your GP on the NHS is the pill that is the cheapest. And they are told to really only give that pill unless there is a real solid medical reason not to. So they want to give you a particular type of pill which works for them. And I think it's really important that people know that and actually start kind of thinking, what are they putting into their bodies and what effect is it having on them, and actually who is making those decisions. And I don't think in this country we do that enough, whereas I think in other countries perhaps where, I mean, I love the NHS, but I think, you know, where people are kind of deciding what pill they take for different reasons, that might be having a different effect. I don't know. Coming back to pornography, I mean, I think that we do know that, I think that pornography is an addiction, just like lots of things can be an addiction. And whatever you think about it, I do believe that, you know, we know that you want to have kind of a bigger and a bigger hit to get you off. And so actually that, you know, that people, if they watch a lot of pornography, they want to watch more and more and more extreme pornography. And that I think that must impact on the kind of sex you're having with your casual partners or your long-term partner. And I think we're seeing, I don't know the statistic, it's something like a 40% increase in young men admitted with impotency to see specialists because, and it is related to pornography, that they just, when they're with you know, a normal partner in a normal kind of quite boring situation, that all of a sudden they don't really, that's not enough, basically. And I think there's a lot of, there's a great, the woman who made that documentary Hot Girls Wanted, she also, there's a great video on YouTube where she talks about that issue and talked to doctors who have dealt with these young men and kind of about the medical issues around it. So it is definitely, I think it is related.
Thanks. Rosamund, would you like to come back on something?
I think porn can be addictive, that escalation thing, for some people. I'm not quite so negative. I think there's plenty of people who straightforwardly can enjoy pornography without it encroaching on their sex life, and I don't see it as sort of the root of all evil necessarily. What I would say, what worries me about porn particularly, is young kids watching it before they've had sex, before they have any understanding of sex, and with no context. And I have a horror story from a friend of mine who went around schools talking to kids about it, which I didn't get to, but I think shows why you need an education system around pornography that actually is reaching kids before they watch this sort of stuff. And it's horrible. A boy throttled his girlfriend while they were having sex. He thought that was normal because he'd seen it in porn. And then another boy was accused of raping a girl. Why didn't you stop when she was crying and saying no? Asked his teacher. Because that's what women do. I.e., he'd seen that in porn. There was no context to that. That was his normalised view of what sex was because he'd seen it there. I think it's quite different to talk about adults who might have, you know, who have sexual experiences watching porn. But I really do think we have to sort of think about what kids are seeing younger and younger and how that then affects their understanding of sex later on. I interviewed a feminist, she calls herself a feminist porn maker, and I said, well, what's the main difference between the porn you make? And she said, well, I see the woman as a person. And I thought, oh, there's something really interesting there. A friend of mine had this idea that we should basically nationalise porn production. And what it would mean is you'd basically flood the market. I mean, they do this, I think, with Ivory sometimes. So they just chuck loads of stuff out there to drive the price down. And so you'd have all this lovely, loving stuff where they talk about consent. And you'd basically sort of have the market so full of that no one could find anything else. I'm not sure that's the greatest strategy, although you'd make a lot of money for the government. I did want to address something else on the pill. So I mentioned to my mum I was giving this talk, and she said, well, my generation was afraid of sex for very different reasons. Pregnancy, because obviously now you have the pill. And I think we have treated it, I think you're absolutely right, we treated it as though it's some kind of miracle pill. And I know so many people who've had disastrous reactions, particularly to microgynon, which I think is the one you're talking about, which is the cheap one that they give you when you turn up age 17, and you get fat and you get unhappy and you're very sort of, your emotions are all over the place, friends crying on the bus, that sort of thing. And I think we've just sort of treated it as though the pill, there are lots of other methods of contraception. Some of them also have problems. I think the ring, which was supposed to be the new miracle one in the US, has been linked to cases of cervical cancer. So I'm not saying any of them are necessarily perfect, but you are just sort of told as a 17-year-old girl or whatever that that's what you should be doing when there are plenty of other options that should be sort of up there for discussion. And I think the other thing I wanted to raise is you touched on this about the extended childhood, which I think is also relevant here. I think someone wrote a book called something like Juvenescence about how adulthood sort of starts later, and I wonder if this is slightly relevant too. I mean, I was thinking about it in relation to the kids coming over, refugee kids, with everyone going, oh, but they might be 19, and you think, well, actually here in our society, you're still treated as quite a child at 19 in lots of ways, with parents quite involved heavily in your life still. You're not really necessarily, 18 isn't some miracle age where you certainly become an adult in every way anymore, because we slightly extend that, and partly that's to do with living at home longer and all those things.
Great, thanks. Emily, last comments.
One of the things that really troubles me about modern feminism, this new trendy feminism that Caitlin Moran kind of perpetuates everywhere, is the kind of the neglect of the battles that were fought before us by Camille, by Germaine Greer. This denigration of the pill, I mean, like a lot of things. I mean, if you read the Daily Mail, like everything gives you cancer. I'm worried, obviously, if this pill does give you depression, but a lot of things can give you depression, and that it slightly worries me. I mean, one of the girls at work wrote this big piece about how the pill's awful. You know, we should just not take the pill because it gives us depression, and there's no feminists don't talk about it. And we should just use the rhythm method. I'm just thinking, what are you on about? And so I would say to you, though, I mean, go to your doctor. If you're worried about a particular pill, get another pill that, you know, or try it. See if you have these hormonal changes, and if so, then change it again or whatever. But don't just kind of go, okay, the pill might depress me, so I'm just going to reject that, because it was just massively liberating for women. I mean, before the 60s, we were, you know, it was a completely different world, and I think a lot of, you know, young girls who are younger than me, they just don't know what the battles were fought. I mean, like, one of the things that Caitlin Moran keeps saying is about how childbirth makes you a woman. I'm thinking, God, why haven't you read Simone de Beauvoir? You know, and what was the other point? The porn thing I find really weird, and I think it kind of has to be negotiated, like, on a case-by-case basis, like talking to, I mean, like, if my boyfriend was, like, seriously into porn, and that kind of really, to me, that just seems, like, really strange. I'd be like, do I actually really want to be with this guy? You know, like, or, I mean, maybe it is, like, diagnosing, like, this massive problem in society. I mean, I do think it's really interesting. I wanted to ask Ella a question, which is, why are there no men on the panel? Did you ask them?
I don't know. No, I just liked you guys.
Oh, thank you very much. No, that's great. But I mean, I wonder what men think about porn, because I'd really like to know, because this is a whole foreign universe to me. I mean, I think one of the things that I find really weird is the hair thing. I mean, like, how are men allowed to grow these heinous beards on their faces? They look like militant jihadis. And yet women, you know, pre-sex, like, let's strip off everything. Let's get the garden mower there. You know, like, it's horrendous. And, like, I was talking to an old feminist friend of mine who said, basically, she said, if Germaine Greer was around now, she would never get The Female Eunuch published. She just wouldn't. Because it was all about social media and idiot opinions and things, and somebody who's actually thought and been that brilliant, she'd never get anywhere. But but she also said that the hairlessness comes from porn, because it was all about the money shot. So basically, like, they wanted to see, like, the vagina and the big moment, and so they would strip the hair off to do that, and that's just gradually pervaded the whole of society. So, but I mean, I would say, like, yeah, I think we need to get back to, like, maybe talking about sex with our sexual partners rather than just diagnosing society as a whole, and just go, okay, if you're really into that kind of really weird stuff, then maybe I want to find another boyfriend. You know, there's quite a lot of men out there.
Right, and let's hear from some in the audience.
So if people were truly scared of sex, is that a bad thing? And the reason I ask that is because it was mentioned earlier that you believe it's a scientific law, I think, that gay people increase as populations increase, right? And scientific law, like what's the X and Y variable, independent, dependent variable? Why would that be? Because I came to the same question, like why like I think, maybe there is increase in gay people because of this, and then I'm like, I don't really have any reason, like, how would you link that? As societies get more healthy, and population increases, that there's more gay people, like how would you prove that? And the reason I ask that is maybe it's natural for societies for people to get scared of sex or fear it over time to reduce population, just like that premise.
First of all, sex, well, it's about exposure, isn't it? It's about privacy, exposure, personhood, it's been said. So if it's an increasingly risk-averse society we are living in, what exposure is like? What will your profile on Facebook be like the next day of a not so successful sex encounter? What will happen with your friends? Will they still be friends with you? Number one. Number two, personhood. I wonder whether it came up in one of the earlier tables. If this is the case, indeed, that people are having less sex, I hope the statistics are wrong. On the same time, we heard that there is a lot more people earlier wishing to change gender. So how are these linked, if they are linked? So coming back to personhood, are then people having less sex because they're more maybe navel-gazing around identity, label, where do they belong to, how should they behave with a partner? Is it about an identity thing? And these are the things that I would like to throw into the debate, because how on earth are they more questioning their gender, but not so much doing sex on average or as a whole anymore? Are these two related?
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I found this discussion quite surreal, really, because it's a discussion about sex, and all we focused on is pornography and biology, and that's about it. It strikes me that this is probably the first time in human or Western civilization that a panel about sex would have focused on these two particular areas, because sex has become completely divorced from any kind of social context. It's become completely rendered from its traditional environment. And I thought one of the comments from one of the younger people in the audience quite telling, in a way, because he stood up and said, well, we're only going to have sex when we're married, ha 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 ha. And something about that contribution, and the contribution made at the front about pornography and why would you, what's the problem with simply masturbating all the time? It strikes me that if we're a society that can't answer that question, about why not just masturbate all the time, we might be in real difficulty here. Because unless we are able to communicate to our young people some kind of alternative sexual morality which isn't solely constituted around yourself and your self-validation, then I think we will be laughing in the same way that young man laughed at marriage about love in 20 years' time. And I think that could be a real problem. Just very quickly, I want to ask a question about Sex and the City, because I've got this theory that Carrie Bradshaw is the ultimate sexual narcissist. So I watched this about 10 years ago, this programme, and she will only sleep with people who give her a sense of validation. If you watch it for long enough, which sadly I did about 10 years ago, you realise that the moment a man inflicts upon her sense of validation, her sense of self, he's gone, he's out the window. And as a result, she ends up with the most bland, Mr. Big, he's called, and she ends up with the only man that makes her feel good about herself. And I'm wondering whether that is the dominant cultural narrative around intimacy today, the idea that it's only worth being intimate with someone if they make you feel good.
Thank you. That is something I really want to draw out. We're not just sex, what about intimacy, what about love? Are we freaked out about that as well?
I was scared of sex as well when I was younger, and I was worried about the pill. And as my sister just said, we worried about whether it would make us fat rather than whether it would make us depressed. And I think we took the same pill that's being offered to children today, and I took it for quite a few years, and I'm still here. But the thing that really struck me is, I worried about all of those things, but I still went and had sex. And somebody back in the back said, and this probably fits into the last point, we don't know what people's intentions are. And I thought, well, I knew what their intention was. Their intention was to have sex with me. I didn't think about it beyond that. Sometimes I had sex with them because I wanted to have a relationship. Sometimes I had sex with them because I just wanted to have sex with them. So the fact that you kind of worrying about their intention at the point of sex is quite an interesting one. And the fact that you're actually advising young people to question doctors when they're giving you the most common form of contraceptive that thousands of millions of women have taken with no problem, and asking them to then question that and do their own research about what they should be taking, does kind of make... as a young person, I'd be kind of thinking, oh my God, what am I letting myself in for? Rather than, woohoo, let me go down the club and pick someone up, kind of.
Okay, I'm coming back to the panel.
Can I just say that I've always thought Mr. Big is a total arsehole, so I completely... I mean, Carrie's awful too, but I don't quite sort of see that he's bland. I think he's a twat, frankly. But on love, I think we actually do still really celebrate. My parents just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary, and I wrote a piece about why we still, I think, really do fixate on people who make something work over that amazing long period and put up with one another and go through the bad times and stick at it. I actually do think, and even in a society where half of marriages end in divorce, we still celebrate that. And I do actually think that sex is an important part of that, of the, it's a horrible, I was going to say glue, that's awful, but something that holds people together. So I do still think we do that. I actually studied demography, and on the population thing about a bigger chunk of the population being gay, well, there's lots of arguments that humanity has way past the carrying capacity of the earth. There's going to be 10 billion of us, there's over 7 billion of us now. We need a lot more gay people then, if that's going to be our fix to it. I mean, there's plenty of other ways that we could clearly control population that are more plausible, I would say, for humanity. I would say we're far beyond that. I think it might be true in animal populations, but I don't personally, from the years of studying these things, I don't think that's what's happening in humanity.
Great, thanks.
In my experience of working with young people, I sometimes do this thing where I ask a class how many people believe in the one, and almost always when people are 16, 17, every single person in the class puts their hand up. And sometimes that's a bit horrifying as well, because you think, oh gosh. But I think we absolutely still do our kind of, for whatever reason, the young people I work with always do seem to want to, they do have dreams of falling in love with someone and having a really long-lasting, happy, intimate relationship. And I think that is still, for most people, what they want to have in their life. And I don't see that that's changed from when I was that age to the young people I work with. That's certainly not something I've picked up on. I don't know. I think what you said was incredibly interesting, but I don't know anything about it, so I feel that I shouldn't really try and say anything.
Camille?
There were a number of things. I'm not sure what to answer first, but my sense is that when the sexes had separate lives, and that there was more of a mystique of sex, more eroticism, because there was like a sizzle of mutual discovery, and the more familiarity that there is, and everyone, if the sexes go to school with each other, they work next to each other, in the office and so on and so forth. I think that there's a certain banality that's come with that. And then there was another issue which had to do with sex, or actually sex in the city, for me, is a kind of tragedy of the modern urban professional woman, and it just shows the rootlessness and the disconnectedness and the difficulties of achieving happiness in a situation where, as women achieve a place in the workplace, that the men of their age, begin to be attracted to women younger than them, and this is a terrible problem facing the young urban professional women. That the longer they postpone marriage, they get into their 30s, and then all of a sudden, the men of their age now have the more nubile girls of the 20s available to them. So just the availability of sex, I think, is what that. Is the undertone of melancholy in the Sex and the City show. But just like quickly, the issue of sexual identity, is a modern one. No one was thinking about sexual identity before Romanticism, before Rousseau, actually, right? And it's gotten more and more important until finally now it's swallowed up everything. The question of sexual identity, and has become very micro in terms of where are you on the gender spectrum. I personally, having studied the history of civilization and so on, have found the pattern. Okay, that androgyny and a higher incidence of homosexuality accompanies late phases of culture, and is often distinguishable from decadence. Okay, which I'm willing to accept. I consider Oscar Wilde is my great role model, but I better stop, okay, because otherwise I'll absorb.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
So with Sex and the City, what I really find disturbing about that is the last time women were focused on like that in a massive TV show that went worldwide was the 90s. And it hasn't happened since. You've got Girls, but that's just, it wasn't anything like as big. I think there's, one of the things I was going to say before I decided that young people just having as much sex as every other generation of young people, was that probably if they are having less sex, if you think about it, it's probably because they're not married. Because when my mother was my age, she had 2 children and she was sharing a bed with a man every single night. And I think everybody knows, if you share a bed with a man, you have sex. Lots. So it might just be due to the massive explosion in single women. And what worries me about that explosion is it's not represented in the literature at all. I mean, I've written a book about it and can't get any interest in it at all, because still are stories about women, about falling in love and getting married and finding Mr. Big. After everything, she finds Mr. Big, and that's how it ends, isn't it? You know, I mean, come on. I mean, like, Carrie was interesting in the early days. The other, you know, like Charlotte gives up work to be a mother. I mean, that show was basically written by Candice Bushnell about New York and actual women, and was taken over by gay men who basically hijacked the entire story to talk about clothes in the fashion industry. Anyway, and the other thing I did in preparation for this panel, which also plays into your question about why aren't we actually talking about sex, and I'm sorry, I obviously haven't talked about sex enough. I said to my friend Felix I was going to tell you all about my sex life, and she said that's really not a good idea. So, but one of the things I did do was I read Camille's reread Sexual Personae, and I wrote some things down because they were so brilliant. And she said, love is the spell by which a man puts his sexual fear to sleep. So there we go. And she also says that conventional marriage, despite its iniquities, has kept the chaos of libido in check. When the prestige of marriage is low, all the nasty demonization of sex instinct pops out. And I think that's what we're experiencing now.
Okay. Now, last round of questions.
Of course I agree.
I was in this room for the debate before on the rise of mental health issues in young people, and I think it's interesting to see if there's a correlation there, because obviously with mental health issues, if there is as big as an increase as is being said, that would come with a lot of low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and to have sex you need to have moderate confidence. Unless it's with a partner and you're really comfortable, it would take confidence and
I think it takes alcohol usually.
And also, what was also mentioned is that less people were drinking and doing drugs.
There we go.
So,
Thank you.
All right. First, I'm sorry if my beard makes me look like a jihadi.
It's very happening. It's a very nice tame beard. That's fine.
Thanks. But my question is, I was wondering of the panelists' views that it might not be that young people are scared of sex, why they're having less sex, but because due to things like Generation Snowflake, we're actually maturing at a much slower rate than previous generations?
Something that I, as a student, would say maybe answers this question, at least for me and for a lot of people I know. The reason we're not having, say, regular sex as single people is it takes up a lot of time with the politics of sex. Like the idea that you have to go out and actually like advance on someone and talk them up and actually have to do it. I have 10,000... Sorry.
It doesn't take that long.
No, but I could be out propositioning someone, or I could be at home doing my 10,000 word essay, you know, so I don't have time to do that.
Okay. Someone speak out in defence of shagging, please. Right, let's go to the back.
My question is, does fear about sex come from young people's struggle with body confidence, given that there is a greater emphasis today on physical appearance with Kardashian culture, out of 10 ratings, and Snapchat nudes? So,
Thank you very much. That's a very good point that hasn't been mentioned yet.
I feel like young people are expected to be afraid of sex because in school, whenever it's talked about, like we had a presentation in year 8 or something, and they were like, oh, wait till your honeymoon, which just, it was like, but some people have already done it that you're talking to here. And we're passed around, like in sex education, we're passed around petri dishes with like fake little lice and fake pubic hair in, and like this is the effect of sex. So I don't know, but like at the same time then I know loads of people who have sex without any protection before, during or after, and like they see it as really casual and offhand. So yeah, I don't think that young people are afraid, but I think that adults expect them to be, and it's taught and presented to them like as a really scary thing, and still the thing of like when you're losing your virginity, it's an amazing thing that should be remembered. And yeah.
Picking up on casual sex specifically, I wondered whether you thought it actually lay outside the realm of sex and these issues were broader social issues to do with people like baseline interacting with other people, because, you know, there's a lot of people, the relationships potentially start online, and so I think it's just general anxiety about people interacting with others.
Thank you. Brilliant. Address anything you want to from the floor, but also let's kind of try and answer this question whether young people are afraid of sex. You can call into question the idea that young people are having less sex if you believe otherwise. So, Lucy, without further ado.
Okay, someone was talking about this generation being under more pressure than previous ones. From working with young people to the extent I do, I think that's absolutely true. People ask me a lot on panels, would you like to be the age of the kids in your books now? And I just say absolutely not. I think it'd be horrific. Mostly because as a teacher, the amount of bullying I deal with that's online, and I've been very frightened by that. So I think when I was talking about this issue in a school, I said, do you think young people are having less sex? And this boy said, I think we've just got less of everything. Less money, less time, less everything. And I was like, oh God. So, maybe I think that is true. I think young people are under pressure. I also think that in this country, we've got to start getting real about PSHE and about sex education. It is still not compulsory for any school in this country to teach any form of sex education whatsoever. Never mind talking about relationships, never mind talking about intimacy, never mind talking about pornography. Nothing in this country has to be done. And I do think that's something that we do need to address. I guess true online interaction, I don't know. I mean, my kind of overwhelming feeling is that I'm not worried. I work with young people every single day, and my experience is that young people are amazing. They're more switched on than they've ever been. They're more opinionated in a brilliant way. I think often I went on the radio recently, and they were really painting quite a doom-laden picture, and I was like, these young people that you're talking about, I don't know any young people like that. Young people are amazing, and I think this is the most exciting generation that's ever been.
Emily.
Okay, so I still don't think young people are afraid of sex. Sorry about that. I just don't. I just get the instinct that they're just not. But Vice magazine says otherwise. You can go and read that. And lots of surveys and so forth. I would kind of like to hear from a man, because I think that maybe they all are obsessed with, Kardashian figures and, porn perfect bodies. But I think, you young girl who doesn't want to, get it on, if you were to take off all your clothes with some man who really fancied the pants off you, he would just, love your bare flesh and the scent of you and, all the wild hair. Look at your wild hair. He'd love to sort of, make that really crazy. So I just think that you need to, just go for it, girl. Get yourself... Stop writing that essay right now. There must be some boy you fancy or girl you fancy. Just go and do it. It's fun, You're missing out. And also, I would recommend... This is what massively cheered me up, because... You know, I've kind of got a bit skinny now, but when I was younger, I used to have tits and ass, and you know, I was a hottie in a different sort of way, where I was like really not very body confident at all. And you know what you need to do? You need to read Charles Bukowski, okay? Because Charles Bukowski will make you want to eat biscuits, because he just loves the female body. And I like to think that men still like that. You know, straight men, obviously gay men, love the gay body, the gay male body. But honestly, you read that and you're like, holy crap, I just need to sit and, eat ice cream, just get naked. You know, they'll like it. So just go and have sex, all you young people. You're all young. So, go and show that you're not scared, okay?
I think what tied together a lot of the last points was that maybe this is symptomatic of other things. So we had housing pressures, more pressure in general, stress, mental health issues, low self-esteem, body confidence. So it's symptomatic rather than necessarily. But there is something else that I've been wanting to call into question, which is more sex is not necessarily better sex. And I do think that one of the things that might be lost here, we're sort of quantifying how much sex people are having when we should be thinking about quality. And certainly, I mean, many of us can think back to our teenage years when we're having a lot more sex, frankly, than we might be having now. But we might be having a lot better sex when we're slightly older, more practice, we know what we're doing, we know our way around somebody's body better. And that actually is something sometimes, not always, sometimes obviously people can have great one-night stands, but there does come, I think there's more good sex that comes in a long-term relationship. I mean, there's more terrible shags that happen in short-term relationships and one-offs than in long-term relationships. And I think, so one of the things that's important is that we think about the quality of the sex young people are having as well as the quantity.
Brilliant, thank you. Can Camille finish us off?
Oh dear. Well, I just want to reflect historically on the fact that this is a contemporary problem. It's not even a modern problem, it's a contemporary problem. We were barely 60 years, not even, into the sexual revolution since the pill. And that once there wasn't all this puzzling about sex, it was forbidden by the church outside of marriage, and that was basically it. But when you look at Romeo and Juliet, for example, Juliet is 13 and turns 14, and at that point she's considered ready for marriage. So what we have here is this postponement of marriage when both sexes are ready, to marry and to engage in sexuality. So we have this long anxiety-filled period that we're all in right now, right? Where every kind of both physical and mental distortion, it seems to me, and neurosis that comes with it. This is something that's brand new in history. This idea now, what kind of sex are we going to have? I mean, the idea that, by the way, it's women who believe that the best sex is in long-term relationships. On the whole, the evidence is that men certainly don't think that men actually get fatigued with the overfamiliarity, and after women have children, okay, there's often this problem where the focus in the relationship and in the home shifts to the children, where the man becomes peripheral, and then which is one reason for the existence of prostitution and the pornography industry. So all kinds of problems that come later. I mean, I don't want to engage in sort of a kind of happy talk about sex that encourages people to take the woman's gentler point of view about sex. Okay, I mean, I think there are a lot of problems in sex, and that the problems can be seen, or the conundrums can be seen in both gay men and straight men, and that there are lessons in pornography, okay, and in this terrible, new strange world of pornography where it indeed it's shifted to the extreme, okay, that I think people must be attentive to, because pornography contains everything that's being currently repressed in our very cold, mechanized lives in the office. Okay, I think it's a whole demonic realm, okay, that the pornography reveals. The unhappy truth about the basics, incompatibility perhaps of the sexes. I'll stop there.
Thank you.